All right, to wrap up the second part of day 3, we're jumping into some theoretical approaches that are newer to the scene, if you will, than old ones. And again, I'm going to try to be brief as I go through each one of these and just hit kind of the major points that I want you to take away from each of these major counseling theories. So multicultural counseling is an approach to counseling. We should all become multicultural competent counselors, but then there's also multicultural theoretical approaches that take what we understand as a multicultural competence as a foundation in our counseling practice and actually adhere to that in every aspect of the counseling that's being provided. So you'll have your cultural issues class where you will start to or continue to develop your multicultural competence, your cultural competence. And that's expected that you, if you're practicing from any other theoretical orientation, CBT, DBT, REBT, all of the acronyms, SFT, MI, that you are infusing multicultural competence into your counseling practice. Multicultural theories are a theoretical approach in and of themselves, okay? So with the multicultural theories, some of this is... So some of the approaches within multicultural theories have been around for a really, really long time. And we see kind of an expansion of our understanding of the impact of culture and society on our clientele within multicultural theories. And some of the things like the holistic approaches, the contemplative approaches, the indigenous healing, the use of, obviously, the addressing and respect models are just ingrained within the multicultural theories. Narrative therapy, network therapy, all of that, those are things that have been around for forever. Okay, but we weren't looking at them through a theoretical lens, through an evidence-based practice lens, okay? And so in more recent years, there's been an acknowledgement that these ways of practicing that have been considered common in different cultural groups, even subcultures to a degree, are really theoretical foundations to approaching counseling. And so there's been as the slide would say, a deliberate move away from the monocultural dominant psychotherapy. So, this is, again, kind of the opposite. I wouldn't even say the opposite end of the spectrum from Adlerian theories and psychoanalysis, but rather like in a whole different world of its own, because there's an acknowledgement of yes, there are multiple perspectives that clients bring to us. Clients are continuously forming their cultural identity. Our job is to help support them, to help empower them, to help facilitate social change, to facilitate advocacy in the wider realm. And there's the working alliance is the process that guides us, right, in our work with our clients. And so within multicultural theories of counseling, it's yes, you have to have that cultural competence at hand. You have to acknowledge your worldview, your biases, your values, limitations in the work that you can be doing with a client. But it's taking all of that to a different level in that you may be actively researching or living within a culture in a way to fully understand the client population that you're working with. Now, do you have to be, native to that culture to be a culturally competent counselor, to work from a multicultural theoretical approach? I wouldn't say no to that. I would say that typically the founders of these multicultural theories do have their own cultural identity, and that is exactly how it should be, in my opinion. So, at the very minimum, we're incorporating multicultural counseling within any approach that we're doing. But if you feel like you have, if you feel like there's motivation and drive to be pursuing that to a greater degree, then a multicultural counseling approach, multicultural theory might be more in line with what your work might be in the future. So I think I went over some of the techniques and concepts, moving into something a little bit similar but yet a little bit different with existential theoretical approaches. Key players being May, Yalom, and Frankel. Existential theorists don't consider themselves to be an independent school of thought, an independent school of therapy. The main concerns that are addressed within the counseling process for somebody practicing from an existential theoretical approach are death, freedom, meaningless, and isolation. And so when working with a client, you're going to be examining their view on death and whether or not they feel like they are free to do things. You're asking kind of those deep questions about the meaning of life, their purpose in life, what they do to find meaning. So if somebody's feeling meaningless, the purpose of counseling is to become have more meaningful engagement in their lives in the present, and to reduce those feelings of isolation and process them. So existential theories are far from concrete, but yet there are still some techniques that are utilized within this theoretical approach. So the counselor is working with the client, of course. There's really a shift away from using any other theoretical approaches. So you're really trying to create an authentic relationship, an authentic experience with your client, and so that they can live more meaningfully and purposefully in the here and now. I say, kind of in parentheses, everybody dies, get over it. Okay, so but it's not as simplistic as that. So you might be evaluating, a view of your client's view of the afterlife, what they expect might happen or not happen, but more so the processing that happens within that. The focus is on the here and now, the present day. Dream analysis is used in a different way, I would say, than psychoanalysis. And self-disclosure, this is probably that area where you're going to see self-disclosure a little bit more than other theoretical approaches. Because, again, there's such an emphasis on the counselor being an authentic traveler in the client's journey. And so with authenticity comes self-disclosure. If we're trying to help our client create some type of meaning in their life or help them figure out what their purpose is, it may be that we're self-disclosing a little bit more about what we believe our purpose is in life and what our meaning of life is. All right, so moving on to integrated approaches, aka eclectic. So integrative is just much more than saying, yeah, I'm an integrated counselor and I do a lot of things and it works for me. So if when you're in 606, you are developing your theoretical approach paper and you want to say you're integrated, great, fantastic. At least half, if not over half of counselors, professional counselors identify as being integrated, and that's fine, but there are ways that you need to be doing it. So it's got to be grounded in something. Integrated therapies have been around forever. I mean, the reality is that counselors and therapists have recognized the limitations that have existed within the older theoretical approaches since their inception. So with that and the understanding that clients are unique and their situations are unique and that counseling is not a one-size-fits-all thing, that's the art of this profession. That is the art of the work that we do. That we can't just say, follow this list of things, these directives, and you're going to be fine when you leave my office. That's not how it works. And so becoming an integrated counselor acknowledges the limitations that exist within each theoretical approach, and then kind of uses one of the 4 pathways to determine how one might practice, okay? So technical eclecticism, theoretical integration, common factors, and assimilative integration, okay, are the 4 main pathways. If you're going to identify as being eclectic or integrated, pick one of these and develop out your approach to being an integrated counselor more, okay? So it may be that you are you're not subscribing to one specific theoretical approach, but you're taking specific procedures from other therapeutic systems. So it may be that you have 2 theoretical approaches that you really like, and they work with the population that you're working with. So you're taking the best parts of those theories, meshing them together in a way that works to create a result for your client population. The common factors, these are kind of, again, a lot of what this text that we've been reading over the semester and the base of the pyramid that we've been working from focuses on these these core elements of psychotherapy, right? We are building alliances and relationships with clients. We are working with our clients. They're developing goals. We are supporting them and helping them move through the process of change. We are helping clients to figure out what those new behaviors are and practice them, process them after they practice them, and working from the positive perspective, the strength-based perspective with our clients. So that again is just working kind of based on those various the core factors and various therapies that exist across the board. Assimilative integration means that you're pretty much grounded in one school of thought or one theoretical approach that you use, but you pull in different little aspects from other systems, depending on, again, the needs of the clients. So you may be, let's say, grounded in cognitive behavioral therapy, but you really, really enjoy the empty chair technique, and you find it to be useful, and so you're pulling that in from Gestalt, okay? So that's just an example of what that might look like. Moving on to one of the newest players in the field of counseling and psychotherapy at this point, positive psychology. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce Mihaly's last name, not going to happen. Seligman is the one forefront person that we typically hear about when we think of positive psychology. Positive psychology has been around for a while. You know, if you're like me, you're like, oh, wow, the 90s was only like 10 years ago. It was not. So it has been around for quite some time. And more importantly, positive psychology is increasingly becoming an evidence-based practice. And so we are able to now go back and look at the research that's been done on the benefits of positive psychology, and we're able to see that yes, statistically, it does work. The approach to working with clients from a positive strength-based approach, it works for clients in a short-term model as well. Sometimes people have a bad taste in their mouth about positive psychology. I like to say that it definitely is not unicorns pooping out rainbows, even though some people have the thought that that's what it is. There is an acknowledgement that bad things do happen within people that practice from a positive psychology point of view. It's about how our clients perceive those bad things and finding a balance between the negative and the positive, understanding what a person's strengths are, helping them to understand that even the strengths, so you took the VIA survey, that's positive psychology right there. So understanding that, you have these high on the list strengths, the ones that are innate to you, the ones that you don't necessarily have to think about all the time. And then you have all these other strengths that are there, but you need to be working on them to get them higher up on the list, right? So, it's all about kind of changing our view and our perspective of what we have inside of ourselves, okay? So it's nice in that it's concrete in terms of having this 14-session model of positive therapy. So ideally, you're just kind of moving through the process with the client pretty nicely, acknowledging from the beginning that there is an end to the process, that you're at 14 sessions, give or take, that ideally the client has been able to identify the strengths within them, use those strengths, incorporate some of the other techniques, positive affirmations, journaling. Those are techniques that have been around for a while, and be able to better address and deal with some of those negative things that happen in our life that we don't necessarily have control over. All right, moving into solution-focused brief therapy. Okay, so sometimes you'll read a textbook and it'll separate out solution focus from brief therapy. There's brief therapy, and then there's brief theoretical orientation. So they kind of go hand in hand. Okay, we're talking about really short-term therapy counseling sessions. The belief within solution-focused counseling is that the work actually starts for a client before they ever get to see you in the first session. In fact, just getting to the point where somebody makes a phone call to schedule an appointment with a counselor is work that's being done. There's an acknowledgement within that from the client that yes, they are seeing that some type of behavior change needs to occur, something needs to be different in their lives. And so in making even the first contact, doing that initial contact, that can be a concrete benefit for a client. Obviously the focus is on strengths, and obviously the focus is on brevity of counseling. So you're not going to see people that are focusing, that are solution focused counselors, brief therapy focused counselors, extending sessions on and on and on and on. Kind of the idea is that if it's not working, if a technique is not working for a client, if you're trying something out and it just isn't it's not hitting well with that client, then you move on, you try something else. There's lots of different techniques that are used in solution focused and brief therapy: miracle questions, finding exceptions, meaning that, you know, if a client feels like everything is bad in their life on a daily basis, then what we do as counselors is we try to pull out the exceptions to that. You know, when was there a good time? Well, what was one moment in your entire 24-hour day that you felt hopeful versus hopeless? Solutions don't have to be complex. They're small but concrete little goals that we can work to and progress to even within one counseling session. Goals are a mainstay. So there's, you know, within solution focused therapy, as the name would suggest, we're always working towards a solution. The goal has to be set early on to get to the solution in a short amount of time. Counselors are more of a consultant within solution-focused therapy versus kind of a psychoanalyst, I should say. And so, again, because of the types of techniques that are used, scaling questions, coping questions, how did you do with that so well in the past? You know, compared to the last time we met, you said you were really unhappy. In a scale of 1 to 10, you were at a 6, with 10 being the most, you know, just really feeling like very depressed, you know, 1 being really happy. You know, today, where are you at? You know, kind of comparing from one point to another if a client has seen a change in their life. I probably should have reversed that. If you're going to be really unhappy, it's probably a 1. Really happy is probably a 10. So just, you know, I'm not going to restart this whole lecture because of that. But all right, so moving into our final kind of approach here with motivational interviewing. So I put an asterisk at the beginning on slide 2 with motivational interviewing because it's not technically like a theoretical orientation yet, I would say. You know, motivational interviewing has been around, again, for quite some time and used regularly within substance use treatment facilities, substance use counseling, and that's kind of where it's grounded. That's the population that motivational interviewing is kind of grounded in. And so we're seeing now that, I would say because of the opioid crisis, that we were seeing MI being used more frequently just because of the number of people that were being served. But I think we're also seeing that you can take some of the founding principles of MI, the process of MI, the process of behavior change that is there, and stages of change, and apply it to individuals and other populations. And so I think with that shift, we're shifting our understanding of motivational interviewing so that, you know, in the future, I would say it probably would be a theoretical orientation, but that's just me throwing out a hypothesis here about it, and that's how things happen. We find that things work with one specific population, we try them out with other populations, see if they work, we gather evidence, and then we have evidence-based practices, right? So again, with motivational interviewing, strength-based approach here, and it's a brief intervention. There are these 5 stages of change. I cannot recall where I put information on this because all of my days are flowing together at this point. But just know that within these 5 stages of change, it's not that somebody goes from pre-contemplation to contemplation and never goes back to pre-contemplation, or that you know, they're in action and then in maintenance and they never go back. So a person can flow within these stages of change, and recurrence is a natural part of that. The types of techniques that are used are going to be dependent on what stage of change a client is in, and of course everything is driven by the client. You know, the client has to be motivated to do the behavior change, which I think is one of the most beneficial parts of motivational interviewing, is that that using MI really puts the focus on the fact that we as counselors cannot change behavior of others. We can't. We can do whatever we can. We can do our best to move mountains, but we cannot change our clients' behaviors. Once they leave our office, they could step out the door and use again. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. We can't change their behaviors, and we definitely can't change the behavior of people that are in their life. And so the work that has to be done in counseling with a client has to be driven by them. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for my little short lecture on the second half of counseling theories. If you can hear my kids screaming in the background, my apologies. That's what working from home with children is like, I guess. So to round out the rest of day 3, I've got just a couple of different resources for you. A nice little chart about some of those foundational theoretical approaches. Some I didn't specifically talk about, like Gestalt, but again, we'll get into that later on down the road. And a nice little table that I wanted to highlight for you, 14.2, that shows the difference between somebody that is practicing in an intentional way versus unintentional, and the difference between the two. So take a look at all of these resources as you're preparing for your second observation, as well as the video that you're going to be doing down the road, and continue to engage in the discussions, and check back on day 4.